round card with Mitch Garver or even Gary Sanchez, who has more power than Grandal. And since, batting average can be so volatile, you never know. Sanchez could out hit Grandal from a batting average standpoint. So for me, I'm off of Grandal just because the low batting average, high power profile, even at catcher, you can find guys with similar types of skills going in the 13th, 15th round range in 15-team leagues, whereas with Grandal, you are paying a pretty decent premium in the 10th round for someone who could really hurt you in batting average. The other thing to kind of keep an eye on is, yes, Chicago does have the DH slot open with Encarnacion out of town, but let's see what happens with Andrew Vaughn. I do think maybe after some service time games, Vaughn's going to be their DH. So Grandal heavily leans on the DH when he's off, and that's how he's able to kind of save his legs and rack up playing time. But yeah, for me, it's more just there's similarly skilled catchers available later in the draft, and when I see that, I tend to always kind of go for those similarly skilled guys that are cheaper. And Grandal for me is just a little bit too much given the profile.
All right, so I don't really see them as very different value-wise. They're going in the 9th round within picks of each other. So to me, it's whoever is cheaper, and I'm not really even looking. In terms of the value, Grandal, we're talking the last couple of years of roto value, 14, 11, 19, 20, 16. So it's somebody who's producing that value. Projections are super tight on him. His interprojectional standard deviation is in the high 2s. He's even got negative skew, so there's even a case that he's going to do even better. Unlike Contreras, Grandal walks quite a bit. Contreras, I mentioned, has a high OBP, and that's why he's up there in on base percentage leagues. But in terms of the difference between batting average and OBP, my goodness, Grandal is 14% career walk rate. That is enormous. So he has got an even bigger push in an OBP league as compared to Contreras. The strikeout rate is also high. You don't like that, and you're talking a much lower possibility for batting average. So yeah, he is a batting average liability, whereas Contreras probably is not as much. But again, we're talking catchers, so you're going to expect it. What I like from Grandal is the run production and the power. I think that there's a good possibility that Grandal beats Contreras in at least 3 out of the 5 roto categories. I think that the lineup on the south side is far better, and we're talking close to 70 runs and RBIs as opposed to mid-60s. And I think the power can even approach 25, 30, maybe even 30. He had 28 homers back in 2019. I think it's a great lineup in Chicago. There's a lot of chances for runs and RBIs. Altogether, I think the package is really, really similar. So I'm not even going to pick one. I think it's whoever comes cheaper. And as we say in the show, when you have two players of the same position or statistics around each other, it's called the hot spot. So if you are inclined to take a catcher in this round, just write Contreras / Grandal, and you can get one of the top catchers in your league. Travis d'Arnaud, Ruvain mentioned. You go first, Ruvain, on Travis.
Well, Travis d'Arnaud, like I mentioned, hasn't played more than 112 games in a season, and he did that back in 2017. He was very, very lucky last year. His BABIP was .411, and his K rate was up. So he must have been doing something right, eating those Wheaties, doing something right. But he's a so-so catcher. I'm not high on him. I've never been high on him, even when he was with the Mets. Believe it or not, I've never been high on him. His ground ball rate was up. His fly ball rate was down, which is not good for a catcher. The only thing that he has going for him is that there's really no one behind him. His backup is Alex Jackson, who's not really anything right now. Now, the Braves are actually rumored into thinking about getting JT Realmuto during the offseason. That's because they need a second catcher. So I wouldn't be surprised if they sign a second catcher just to back up d'Arnaud, just as insurance, just like anyone else. If you draft d'Arnaud, I think you should have another catcher as insurance.
I feel like this is one of the catchers that the Tampa Bay Rays took a look at and said, we can make something of you, and they sure did. What are your thoughts on the Atlanta backstop?
Yeah, no, you guys covered him. You guys covered him really well. Obviously, he hit 320 last year. That's not gonna that's not gonna stick. It's just funny how Darno was such an injury. I mean, every single season he hit the IL, 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. The last couple years, I mean, 2019 was recovery from Tommy John and then COVID last year. So he's actually kind of had the opposite path of someone who started out really injury prone and hasn't been. But similar to Grandal, I mean, great lineup. I love the Atlanta lineup, and so he's serviceable, but I still think that injury risk is there a little bit. Another guy who played 7 of his 44 games at DH last year. So I kind of sound like a broken record here, but that's going to be gone from Darno. So you're not going to get that same number of plate appearances on a kind of a per game basis that you were expecting to get in 2020. So a fine target if you kind of want to fish in that 10th, 11th round. Going to give you more batting average than Grandal, but not as much power. So just kind of see where that fits with the rest of your team and go from there. But I don't have a major kind of different. I don't see a major difference between Grandal and Darno in batting average leagues.
Oh, I think Darno is a little bit safer in batting average. I mean, the Statcast numbers are just fantastic with him, with the barrel rate and the huge exit velocity, and he is having more line drive. Look, the Braves trusted him last year, batting him cleanup in the playoffs. What does that tell you? I mean, you had Freddie Freeman, Acuna, and they batted Darno's cleanup. I think the Braves really see something in him. I think the batting average is more stable than you think. I think that, and you know what? There aren't that many catchers who give you that batting average. And if you can find one of them, then it's just a great pad to your batting average. You're going to do so much better in batting average than the others if you're getting a 260 guy, whereas somebody else is rostering a 220 guy at the very end.
I was just gonna say that's absolutely right, and like the batting average floor for catchers, there aren't many guys like that, and those go to the guys that really can't hurt you. If at the very least they're racking up plate appearances and getting hits, and obviously the counting stats, the runs, RBI that go with it. So that's a great point.
Yeah, and the homers, I think they're super safe. I mean, he's always been a mid-teens homer guy, and now he has this consistent Statcast drama with he just crushing the ball. I think I'm projecting only 18 homers on ATC. I think that's so doable. I would probably take the over if I knew he was going to not get injured. I think he is a much safer person than you think, and it's a good profile to have, especially in a 2-catcher league. I think it really fits in, and it's so unique as a catcher. Other than the stolen bases, I mean, this is close to Real Muto's productivity. Well, not exactly. I'm making that up. But I like the blend of the profile very nicely. It's not the typical catcher profile, put it that way.
Well, I mentioned all the games that he missed. You know, that can be a positive for him too, because he's older, but he doesn't have all that wear and tear in him. So he can go both. You can think of it both ways. You can think of it positively if you want to.
Yeah, that's the old question. You know, do you trust somebody that's got a lot of mileage on their arm as a pitcher? Well, on one hand, they're super reliable. They've done it. But on the other hand, they've got a lot of mileage. So you should trust them less.
I was just going to bring up that starter comparison. Like the classic is Felix Hernandez, who was an old, 27-year-old, and a Jacob deGrom, who, that the mileage and age is completely different for those kinds of guys. And I think there is that comparison there with catchers for sure.
Yeah. Let's go to the next one. Pedro Severino of the Baltimore Orioles. This is a little bit lower down, but ATC shows it's a relative bargain to what you're getting. It's only going for about a $2 average auction price, and he might be a little bit worth that on a relative basis. If you do the math, I have him projected as negative $1, but again, we talked about that market premium for catchers. What are your thoughts on Pedro Severino? Any interest, Ryan?
I mean, not really. I'm not excited to, if I walk away from the draft table with Pedro Severino, it's nothing I'm getting excited about. The thing that I will say though is he is from an ADP standpoint, he's one of the last usable catchers in a 2-catcher format. So if you're getting deep into starting to get towards the end game in your 2-catcher league, and Severino's one of the last few guys available, just know that if you don't take the plunge on someone like him who's going just outside the top 300, you absolutely then are going to have to play the streaming game or kind of take a complete loss at the position. So Severino is one of those kind of final guys where he's available, he's going to play for Baltimore, hitting a pretty good park. And after him, it falls off really quick towards unusable guys. So yeah, again, not excited to grab him, but if I need to get that second catcher and I don't want to kind of punt that spot, he's one of your last choices, and he'll be fine. I mean, we're at HQ, we're projecting a 240 batting average with 14 homers. Like, that doesn't sound great, but for a second catcher going outside the top 300, that'll do. And I don't really see much ceiling from that. But again, at that point in the draft, you're just trying to get guys who are going to play every day, and Severino fits that bill.
Yeah, I actually like that projection better than ATC. ATC has only 11 homers, and I think that's low. One thing that when Ruben and I were going through this position player by player, we thought that his playing time was light. I think that a lot of the projections that are out there are showing him getting at bats in the low 200s, and we think for our own personal rankings, we're bumping him up higher in the at bats, which translates to counting stats directly. I think it's a guy who's pretty stable. He's a guy who his strikeout rate's only 20% or so, which means that there is not a batting average floor to drop, meaning, sure, he's only at 240, but that won't drop to 210. Like, that'll stay somewhere around the area. Not a big ceiling, but you know what you're going to get with them, and that's a value as well, especially with that low catcher value. Good ballpark. Get a somewhat decent spot in the lineup. I think it's a guy to take a good flyer on as your second catcher, and just to give you some counting stats above and beyond what the market is pricing him for. Ruben?
The only thing I'd be worried about is when are the Baltimore Orioles going to bring up their top prospect, Adley Rutschman.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that runs into, and that's why I think people are not giving those counting stats as much as at bats.
Right.
But he had all his peripherals were the same last year as they were in 2019, and he was on pace to 15 homers and batting 250, which at a catcher at this level is not that bad. It's just going to be about him, about the playing time, and when the Orioles decide to actually make the switch.
You think, Ryan, any chance that Adley Rutschman comes up mid-season, end of season, late season? Not at all. Any thoughts?
Yeah, honestly, I don't know. I mean, the one thing I will add is and HQ research has shown this a lot, is a lot of your kind of top catcher prospects, there's just so much to pick up and learn at the position that a lot of these guys don't take off right away. Like your Buster Posey's kind of the exception to that rule when he was brought up. But I think even if Rutschman gets brought up, I think it would be kind of I don't think they're going to throw him into the fire. It would be still more of like a timeshare. So I think Severino's pretty safe from a playing time standpoint. If Rutschman comes up, it won't be till probably till the second half of the season. And at that point, you're already getting pretty good playing time floor from Severino. So that's not really too much on my radar with him.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's why I think that the at-bats are low for whoever's projecting. Most of the Fangraph sites projecting the 200. Curious, what does HQ project for at-bats for Severino?
Yeah, so we do our playing time projections by like percentages of the team's kind of total group, and so we've got him at 60% catcher and 10% DH. So we've got Severino actually at 400 at bats. So we're pretty keen on his playing time for this year.
Right. So it's even more than ATC. So I guess you would agree with that. At least HQ numbers agree with my sentiment that these numbers are a little bit low, that he'll probably get more, and that the Adley Rutschman, if he does come up, won't be the lion's share of the playing time. He'll still be the Pedro Severino will still be the main catcher. So that's interesting. Go to another situation that I think bears worth looking at. Danny Jansen and Alejandro Kirk up in Toronto. I know some people are high on Danny Jansen, and there are some good interprojectional volatility metrics for Danny Jansen. I don't think he's a great player. I think that the Blue Jays are going for it. Kirk already came up and showed up in the majors last year. Even though he might get some more seasoning to start this year, I think he either comes up right away or takes over as the main catcher, or at least gets a nice share of the playing time as we go on. Alejandro Kirk, we're talking a guy who was projected for a 270 batting average. We're talking probably one of the highest projections in all of the catcher position, and it's legit. Some power too. I think Kirk is just somebody that bat is so ready, and I don't know if they have enough room there in Toronto to get him in the DH spot, but I think they want to bring him up. They showed last year that they were willing to bring him up. Danny Jansen, he's on the decline. And look at his batting average: 247, 207, 183. I think the time is ticking for him. He did show some promise last year. His walk rate was 14%.